history never changes, but our perception of history changes. And that's sometimes what drives the narrative of whatever you're going to speak about. So when I started speaking, it was more so, here's my story, do what you want with it. If you get something out of it, that's great. And then I think as I got older, the more and more it went from telling a story to turning it into a presentation that more people can benefit from. So I didn't want to just tell my story. I wanted to tell my story and also say, hey, this is how you can help someone who might be struggling, or here are the conversations that you can have. Here are some of the warning signs, and kind of evolving the story into really a presentation that affects more people. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. And kind of going back, and this is something that has changed, going back to the administrators and parents, the best thing is when the administration of a school is just on board. You have the superintendent that will come to the presentation, and you'll have parents who will come and being invested in mental health, I think is hopefully the biggest goal that we have with mental health awareness for students. And if we can get to that point, I think it will help normalize a lot of the conversations that are taboo, right now.
Yeah, it's the normalizing it that's important. It's just like sexuality or anything else. It's like, make it not a big deal, and that's the way to get by it. I think it's not a big deal. It's like it's like somebody's choice. It's like if somebody got a car today, they wouldn't come up and say, you got to see this. I got electric windows in the car. You push a button, they go up. You push a button, they go down. It's not a thing anymore.
Right.
It's not a thing anymore. And most of these things shouldn't be a thing. And I think some of them, get more than attention. And I think that the people that are involved in the different causes want to keep them in the limelight. And I understand that, but there's got to be some break off where you don't want to keep it as special or different. It's a cause, but you want it to fall into the pot with everything else and mix in. And you don't want it to be a standalone thing. Just like, you want to normalize rights for people, whether they have mental health or they have physical handicaps or whatever. You want to normalize it. You don't want to stand it. You don't want to go back to the days of us, leaning in and talking real loud to people who have some ailment because we think that speaking louder is the cure for everything, We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago. He's about your age, and he asked me. He said he wanted pictures from the show, and he said, "Can you?" He said, "Do you know how to airdrop?" I said, "You did not just lean in and loud talk to me about technology, did you? Do you know how to airdrop?" Like I'm 8 million years old. Yes, I know how to airdrop, and we've been guilty of that, and we think that's our way of, they're there, and I think we've done a good job equalizing things, but I think we're all born the same, but we're not equal. Our place in the world, our upbringing, handicaps, physical, mental issues take us in different directions, and I don't think we'll ever be able to make everybody equal. I think that's too difficult. Now, on the one hand, I think it's an unrealistic goal for everybody to be equal in that regard. I think when you see people stopping people from trying to achieve the equality, I have a problem with that. Right. Because people should be allowed to go at it and try and get as much as they want. And you stop when you want, but somebody else shouldn't be stopping you. Right. Do you ever see a time when you're not doing this? What would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
That's a great question. Now I would probably be, because the other part of my job...
Selling sensible sweaters at the sensible sweater store.
Right. The other part of my job is to help start mental health clubs at middle schools and high schools. So I would think even if I'm done speaking and I decide to step away or take some time off, I'd probably still want to be involved and invested in helping schools start mental health clubs, because it's certainly something I never had before. Back when I was in high school, it's certainly something I didn't even think kids would be interested in, but seeing that kids are really interested in doing that and having conversations at school, I think is pretty cool. And so I'm glad I can be a part of that. This was definitely not the goal in mind when I was a kid. I always wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I wanted to go into broadcasting. I love to write. I love sports. And so to go from that to doing something that I truly, truly love. And I always say this, the best part of my job is I get to tell students what I wish I would have heard when I was in high school. And that's one of the things that kind of drove how I wrote the presentation and kind of how I present it today.
Well, that goes back to something I was saying to the guy last week, same guy. It's like, when you're helping people, the best thing I've come up with, it may not be the best thing, but it's what's been best for me is be the person that you needed at that age. Mm-hmm. Whatever that is. Yeah. And that's all you can be. And, as far as what you were talking about, the things you wanted to do, why don't you do a podcast about this?
Wow.
Yeah. Start off doing a podcast, and I'd be happy to help you however you want, because I came out of nowhere. I do emergency services. I decided I just wanted to do this, and because that gives you another way, because the radio is good, but the podcast gets passed around.
Right.
And it gets shared, and you get a different audience with the podcast. Podcast is mainly the in-transit audience, driving in their cars and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that could increase the ripple effect of what you're doing, and take it into, because right now it seems like, and I may be wrong, I won't tell you your business, but it seems like you're focused more on younger people, right. And that could get you into that 40-plus market, right. Which we're a little down too, Yeah. But see, that market doesn't talk about it as much, because that market is pretty much, walk it off, But if you're in your car, a podcast is very intimate. You're choosing when to listen to it, where to listen to it. Somebody told me the other day that they sent me a thing. They had listened to the podcast, and they said 2 days ago, and I responded back. I said, well, that would have been Friday, right? I said, yes. I said, you listened to the podcast with your girlfriend on Friday night, which I'll call date night, for lack of a better term. That's what you did with date night. I am both flattered and saddened that the best thing you, as a young couple, could muster is listen to me on my podcast. And I made sure I just cover that, because I made sure that I told him that I would chastise him on a future show. Like, do not listen to me on Friday evenings with your girlfriend. Please take her out to someplace nice where you order food, not speaking into a clown's head or something, and they have metal utensils and linen napkins. But do not listen to the radio show on a date night. This is clearly a Monday or Tuesday or Sunday thing, We're not a date night thing. I don't want to be there on date night. That's making me sad. But you could do a podcast. You could get out to so many people that just even in a public environment are kind of a little too uptight to talk about it. But podcasts really catch people when they're alone with their own thoughts, and it makes them think differently. It's and the good thing about doing them is that we already have the wardrobe for it. There's nothing special you have to do, right. And it just goes out there and it's just doing what you're doing. You're just having a conversation. You could just take it and do it. And it'd be an adjunct to what you're already doing. And because I think what you're doing is great, because I don't think there's a lot of people doing it. Right. There's a lot of people telling your story. Have you ever considered? It's gotta trouble you that you don't know what happened prior to the window. Right. Have you ever considered something like hypnosis or something like that? Or you do not want to open that can of worms? Maybe
I did. Probably for the first year of being back home at the same bedroom, same place. And then I think after a year, I started speaking and I realized this is more of a blessing than a curse. Because I don't know if I could relive going out that window every single time I go in front of an audience and tell my story. I don't know if I would want to picture that every single time that I talk. So in a way, I don't know if I would still be speaking 10 years later if I had that same image and same thought. So I got to a point of just acceptance of I'm never going to remember. And the doctor explained it to me as a hidden memory. It's something that your brain protects itself from.
It's like a circuit breaker protecting yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So
that's really poignant, because if you survive that kind of thing, you were meant to survive for a reason, and you didn't have the knowledge at that time to realize that you were meant to survive for a reason. So, there's a point. Most people meander through their life and not knowing why they're here, what their purpose is, or if they're even supposed to really be here. You at least have the gift of knowing that you're definitely supposed to be here, because if you weren't, you would definitely not be here. And I'm just going to make a comparison to the original, the prequel to Glass, Unbreakable, but you're not quite unbreakable.
Well, what's funny is I did an interview with the ESPN E60, and that was the name of the piece, was Unbreakable. So it's funny.
Well, when you went over your list of injuries, I think it should be called Pretty Damn Resilient, not Unbreakable. But no, it's an interesting concept, and I think I've seen a lot of people I know that have gone through accidents, and it's defined them, versus people that have had so-called rosy lives and are my age or near my age, never had to deal with any kind of thing. And I don't envy them, because they've had this illusion. And I think that as you get older, it's tougher to deal with things, and something's going to happen, and you may not be able to deal with it at that age. To have what happened to you happen at such a young age and change you. What's interesting to me is that when people typically have trauma, or mainly in addiction and things like that, they get, maturity-wise, they get stunted at that age. And I wonder, is there any part of you that is that age, that mentally before the window, and still, is there any part of that gets stunted at that age, or did it just super mature you because of the rehab and the pain and the day to day, and how did it impact you? I mean, do you ever feel the silliness of that youth, or is it all sweater?
I think it's a little bit of both in a way. I mean, I get to, yes, of course, I think adversity cannot be created organically. I think it's just something that you go through in life in some type of way. And I think from that is where a lot of that maturity came from. 3 months in the hospital is, it's tough for an 18-year-old.
And how long with rehab?
I started physical rehab outpatient in May of 2008, and then continued that all the way through 2010. And I wouldn't say I could actually walk probably until 3 years after the suicide attempt. So, it took a while physically to just get back to the place where I'm at today. And slowly but surely, things have gotten better. Still to this day, I walk with a little bit of a limp, and I can't stand straight up. But you get to appreciate things I don't think I would have appreciated before. Last year was the first time. I'm an avid golfer. I love to golf ever since I was 6. And last year was the first time I golfed and walked 18 holes since, the suicide attempt. And I definitely wouldn't have had that same, feeling after golfing, before this happened. But there's just little things like that you experience in life, and it's just different. And there's a little more gratitude added in there. And I think there's still a part of me that enjoys being silly and having fun. I think part of that is from traveling and going to other schools, and yeah.
I've had a number of traumatic injuries happen to me over the years, and your body pays price in different ways. From your consolidation of injuries at one time, has your body become a barometer for the weather?
Yeah, I know. Rain, cold, it's just,
you can tell anything
right.
Your joint pain.
Right.
Now, see, that combined, you knowing the weather by your body, combined with that sweater, I feel like you want to throw me off your lawn. I told you boys not to be up here. You ain't got no business up here. I know your mothers.
Now, honestly, my attitude as I've gotten older is just, I don't, when I was 19 and when I spoke to high schools and middle schools, then I knew what the culture was. Right. I knew who was popular. I knew what music was being listened to.
Yeah, you the whole kind of matter.
Now it's like I'm just more listening than I am speaking when I go to these schools, just trying to get a feel for how this culture is and how it's different.
Yeah, because it changes so much quicker.
Yeah, it does.
It's not generational. It's in between generations.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hit the button, Russell.